Matakiapi. Wichoka Yawashte Matakiapi. Good afternoon, relatives. I'm going to go ahead and do a reading, a live reading out of the Meditation with the Native American Elders book. And I am on the road again, so obviously I'm in my car. And I'm on the highway, so just so you know, I'm like going at a good clip. It's a little snowy here in South Dakota, so I'm just making sure that I'm staying safe and putting distance between myself, what's in front of me, and what's behind me before I do these type of things, especially when I read. But I'm going to address you as relatives. I just want you to know that, because in our traditional Indigenous belief, we view each other as everybody as relatives. So you're just going to hear me say that a lot. And I hope that when you hear that you'll feel like you and I are relatives, that we're kin, that we belong to a system, a family, a much larger family. And so in that traditional and spiritual way, I will address you as relatives. And if you're watching from YouTube, this is going to go on different media. If you're watching from YouTube, I just ask that you consider sharing this video and also liking and subscribing. I've been doing this now for about 7 or 8 years, and I just decided to move it over to YouTube as far as my vision for a long-term goal. Not just with video, with my life, things that I see happening. And so I appreciate that. And the thing that I will always issue this disclaimer, or whatever you want to call it, I appreciate your patience, is that the only preparation that I do is that I don't edit my videos, because I want them to be raw. I want them to be uncut. I want them to be imperfect. I want you to see the imperfections that exist in me, that exist in creation, that interconnectedness that exists in you. And I want that to be a part of my own development, so that I can bring that balance within the vision that is within, and also the vision that is interconnected with everything that lives. And so when I say relatives, I'm not just speaking in terms of relatives of one human being to another, but I'm speaking in perspective of the interconnectedness that exists within all of us, not just your intellect or how your day is going, but to speak directly from my spirit, my soul, to yours. And that interconnectedness includes the respect that our Indigenous people have in our interconnectedness, our kinship with all beings. Grandmother Earth, the star nations, etc. So, excuse me. But as I go along the highway, I do have to sort of be careful because of the changing in weathers, and have respect for that, and respect others as well as they go where they need to go. So thank you for your patience. I'm going to secure this real quick, and I'll get to the reading. I do have to pick up the pace a little bit. Okay, so for December 12th, I'm just going to read out of this book, Elders Meditation, Meditation with the Native American Elders, and then I'm just going to share about it. I'm not going to just tell you that I'm going to agree with the reading. Sometimes I disagree with the readings. Sometimes there's little differences. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the things that are in common. In this world, much of the time we're taught to look for the differences within each other. And that is important, because we need to find where we belong. We need to be around people who speak to those commonalities so that our spirits and that our lives can evolve, because nothing, we know, we are taught that nothing stays the same. Everything is changing. Everything is experiencing change. Everything is evolving. It's a movement. Nothing, absolutely nothing sits still. And so when we start to accept that, we'll notice that life itself is sort of nudging us to continue, or to even look back. So when we think in terms of movement, we usually typically are taught that movement means going forward. And that's what we refer to as linear thinking. Linear thinking, like from A, B, C, D, from here to there, without ever thinking and seeing in regard to there's much more to life than A to B, because then we sort of get hyper focused on getting to B, and now we only see what's next, C. And even in the English terms, we're using the alphabet, which limits us. So what these teachings do, they stretch our souls, they stretch our spirits to think outside of what we've been conditioned to believe. Move forward. Oftentimes, in order for us to see and to experience life, we need to actually go back. We need to actually visit where we come from, whether it be going to those places, because I know for myself, part of my journey has been to visit places where I was long ago. And that includes geographically, going to a childhood home, going to where my ancestors once were. And I've known a lot of people and met a lot of people who were in the process of doing such things. And so I'm going to ask for you to think in terms of setting aside that type of thinking, and just for a moment allowing yourself to be teachable to something new. And so I'll go ahead and do today's reading for December 12th. And again, I don't know what it says. The only preparation that I've done for the meeting, I usually will like to smudge down with a sacred plant relatives, like a plant like usually sage or cedar or sweetgrass. And that is the only preparation that I typically do. I don't look at the book, so I can prepare in that regard. I want to go into these teachings with only a teachable mindset. I want creation to know that I'm open to new teachings, new learning, and I'm my mind and my soul isn't being constrained by keeping things out. And so by letting creation and letting my soul be completely open, I am letting creation, I'm going into that energy of interconnectedness that is open to all. And so basically I'm practicing what I preach. And so here's today's reading. And I'll read slowly just so I can do so safely as well. So please excuse me there. In order for our children to survive in the world, we need a firm understanding and belief in the basic principles of sharing, freedom, and respect of individuality. There is a saying, tell me, I'll forget. Show me, I'll remember. Engage me, I'll understand. The adults need to determine what the younger generation is to learn. The principle of sharing keeps the youth from being greedy and selfish. The principle of freedom teaches the youth about choices, decisions, and consequences. The principle of respect keeps us from playing God and becoming a controller of all things. We need to learn these lessons so we may demonstrate them for our children. And then there's a brief prayer at the bottom that I'll share as well. Creator, teacher, help me to understand your principles. So I really like that because, you know, we can do all the talking and teaching in regard to voice, but we know that our children are watching. We know that creation, the grandmas and grandpas, the ancestor, God, Wakantanka, however it is that you believe, is listening, and that there's purpose to our voice. There's interconnectedness because everything has a voice. Whether or not the human ear has been conditioned to actually understand that more deeply, we pretty much are very much limited. And we know that when we go into like a meditative state. We know that when we go into a meditative state, we learn things. What we learn is that there is much more to what we're hearing than what we thought, because even our hearing can be limited. And so basically what we're reconditioning ourselves to is listening more deeply to the voices that also need to be heard. And so if we were to, say, go on a vision quest, if we were to do that, we would be focusing our energy upon the hearing respect, and we would be also singing. And so we would be doing so with the acknowledgement that all living beings as well have a voice. And so when that happens, when we start to focus on that, what we start to learn is pretty soon we're not hearing the traffic no more. We're not hearing the TV anymore. We're not hearing the radio. We're not hearing the buzzing from the refrigerator. We're not hearing the sound of the neighbors. So those are the typical things that we hear. We're not hearing YouTube. We're not hearing the noises of people coming and going. And so we're not hearing those things no more, right? And those are valuable things to hear. We need to know if the refrigerator is running and keeping our food safe and edible. And all that is important. We need to know who our neighbors are. We need to know if we're safe or not. All this is important so that we can, this is a part of our life. But when we go up on the hill, we're away from those type of voices. We're away from those type of hearings. And now we're starting to hear something new. We're starting to listen to the voices. We're starting to connect with the voices of the wind. And not just the voices of the wind, which is very, very, very important. And our traditional perspectives teach us that. And so we become connected to a deeper part of our sensory. And this is really important because many of us go through our lives and that is left out of our life way. That is left out. So there's a real large perspective of living, of being a part of, that is typically left out. And you might know that because maybe once a year you take a vacation and you go off somewhere and you're away from the noise and you start to feel peace and you start to feel a part of you that is deeply more connected, and you feel inspired, you feel rested, you feel more loving. And that is the influence and that is the interconnectedness that I'm talking about. And that is part of what's important. That's why we want to raise our children to receive that experience. And so when we're off like that, and that is important in our Indigenous Native American perspective, is to do that. Before I make a decision, before I give voice to myself, give voice to my family, give voice to a nation, give voice to another family, it is wise to receive that type of energy, that type of interconnectedness that you get from going out and being with other people, but also going off and being alone. Because when you're alone, you start to hear things that you didn't hear before. And so you'll notice that the wind doesn't work on its own. You'll notice that the wind works with all of creation, that it is an interconnected, that there is a kinship, that everything is related, that the plants work with the wind, the weather, the seasons, that everything works together. And you'll notice that we work together with that. But there is a much deeper understanding that happens there. You'll notice that when you're out alone, that the trees have a voice. And new science has confirmed that, because we can only hear. We've been conditioned to believe what we can only hear by what we tell each other. But when we start to teach each other that we can hear more deeply, and there was a new study, a very active study that was done, and I'm sorry, I can't remember where, but you really just have to YouTube it. And what they did was they set up extrasensory microphones that hear beyond the capabilities of the human ear. And so basically they set microphones up next to plants, and in our indigenous way we refer to the plants as relatives. We have a very deep respect and a kinship with Grandmother Earth, right? For which we obviously want to be even in existence. But Grandmother Earth has then produced and has a kinship with the trees, with individual plants, because it does talk about individuality in this reading and what we just read. And so what they did in this study is they proved what we have already known, is that there is much more to what's happening in life than what we are being conditioned to believe. And the importance of that is that what we're teaching our youth and what we're being taught is very limited. And the consequence of that is that we are making sort of ill-informed choices in less informed decision making than what's available to us, and what we know is actually what is available to us. And so what this study did is it did confirm what our indigenous nations have known all along, is that every being has a way of life. The Deer Nation, they have a way of life. They have their own language. And of course, we've been conditioned to believe that because we don't understand that language makes it less important. So we're going to have to walk with forgiveness. We're going to have to ask these plant nations, these four-legged nations, these animal nations, if you will, for forgiveness, for the harsh judgment that we have bestowed upon them. And then we're going to have to forgive ourselves for putting our own selves into a small existence, into a small box, which keep others out. And this is a good journey. This is a good road, because now it's encompassing all of creation, and it is inviting perspectives from, again, that interconnectedness that already exists. But for the most part, because human beings typically only think in terms of intellect, we leave much of life experience out of that intellectual connectedness, that intellectual equation. And so science is confirming, and they put these high density microphones to record what plants do at a higher frequency that our ears as human beings cannot hear. But that's only because we've been conditioned to believe that we can't hear them. In our old stories, we know that there are stories that tell us that at one time we could hear each other in such a way. And so all you have to do is YouTube this, and you'll see this study. And what it did confirm our belief that plants do have a language. And so just go ahead and just do that. And that's good. That's good for you to do. So it will expand the information that you have and expand your experience, because it's meant to expand. It's not meant to just think in terms of human voice or human hearing. A, B, C, or D, and I'm boxed in. And so our children, when they come into this world, they already know this. They know this already. And if you were lucky enough to grow up poor in regard to value as money, or not having any money, if you were lucky enough to grow up poor like me, we didn't have money. We had to go without. And what that led to, and what that meant to, is we needed to find value outside of the limitations and constructs of human money. We had to look outside of what money can be bought, and that provided us with the teachings of what's available when you're actually going outside, when you're actually going and exploring the land, when you're actually going and being a part of what we refer to in English as ecosystem. And I know the value of that is because I found the value of the kinship of how much Grandmother Earth loves us when I was a very young child. And I realized that I was a grandchild to Grandmother Earth. I was a grandchild to the turtles that were in the stream. I was a grandchild to I was a relative to everything that existed. And what I would do is I would stay in those places to learn. And so there is a value that only money keeps us from, and only our conditioned mind to view money in such a way as all valuable. And our English words really strengthen that limitation. I can't have experience unless I have money. That I need to have money in order to have that experience. But the natural world says that the greatest value, now you can have either or, but if you think about what really keeps us alive is what comes from the natural world. Teachings, we use words like agricultural. Agriculture, using those terms, keeps us at a distance. But when you use the term, when we look at the plants as relatives, all of a sudden we are closer to them. And what happens is we start that kinship. When we view the plant nations as relatives, that affects how we hear. It's just like as if I just saw you and you are a stranger to me. We are just walking down the street. And I don't know you, and I pass by you every single day. I barely notice you, only enough to get by you so I can get from A to B. So in other words, my thinking is typically, I don't know you because I've been conditioned to believe that I don't know you. And now, because I'm going from A to B, I've been conditioned to see you as only a barrier to get to B. If you're in my way, then you're just a barrier. You're something to walk past. You're something to be ignored. You're not something to be engaged. You're not somebody to get to know. You're in our deeper thinking of kinship, we know that you are a soul. You are a spirit. And when we think in terms of that, now all of a sudden, you are not something to be reduced. You are something to be shared with in that expansion of interconnectedness of soul and spirit. Now all of a sudden you are a relative, because I'm using relative terms. And what happens is that empowers my experience at that moment. Now all of a sudden we're connected, we're talking, our voices. Something deeper is happening in that moment. And that's something that money, I don't need money to do. But that's what we've been conditioned to believe. We've been conditioned to believe that I can only have healing if I have, if through linear thinking, I can only have healing if I have money to go to the doctor. When we ignore that healing is all around us. Wellness is all around us. And so what prepares us for relationship is that wellness all around us. We've been conditioned to say, I'm not ready until I get from A, B, or C, or D, until I get to Z. Now that's healthy thinking, because to say I need something, to say I'm not ready, if you can just rephrase that, just find new words. Because when you say I'm not ready, you're saying I'm not good enough. There's a real negative connotation that comes with that language, and what it does, it keeps us reduced. It keeps us hyper-focused to say, when I get to Z, then I'm going to be ready. But it's okay to feel as though you are not ready, because sometimes you're not ready. You're not ready. That is healthy thinking. But if we just rephrase that and to start to voice that differently, that's going to affect our interconnectedness with our relatives. And we can rephrase that by saying, I'm being taught. And so what happens is what that does, that expands. That doesn't limit. And pretty soon we start to think in terms of holistic, circular expansion. And we're not limited to A, B, C, or D thinking. Because when you're when you're saying, I'm evolving under a system of diversity, under a system of interconnectedness of teachings with all of creation, and now we're starting to flow within the natural system. Because for the most part, most things that are living are invisible. And when we start to tap into the interconnectedness of Grandmother Earth, Mother Nature, and even within ourselves, we start to see life in a different perspective. And what happens is the world starts to slow down. And then that's what happens is all of a sudden the box that we've been living in, and oftentimes we feel very safe within that box. This is, we're boxed in, we're at home, we're looking at a TV, a box. Everything is shaped to strengthen that limitation. But when we start to think of circular, we start to think of flow. We start to think in terms of movement. A box thinking keeps us bouncing off walls. And it really limits our learning and our perspective. And what happens when you start to look more deeply, creation will start to reveal itself because it's there at depth. The only way you're going to find what's out there is to actually go out there. The only way you're going to find what's in is start to think in terms of depth. And so it's really healthy for us to look at ourselves and start to understand, and we're not going to know everything at once because Mother Nature knows how to sort of spoon feed us. Mother Nature, creation, kinship knows our weaknesses, knows our vulnerabilities, and will start to only spoon feed us and work with us where we are at. And so even that oftentimes can feel very overwhelming, because I don't want to be out of my box. I want to stay. I have TV to watch. I have a routine. And not understanding that we can always go back to that routine. We can always return to that. There's nothing wrong with having structure in our lives. There's nothing wrong with having routine. But there is something very much wrong when our soul is telling us that we need to move, that we need to start to do things differently. And that is when that tells us and we start to let that sink in, now we're becoming more teachable outside of the human intellect. And Mother Nature and creation and kinship is going to understand us. It's going to have to assess us. And in other words, we're stripping ourselves naked to creation, to the influence of the unseen world, to the natural world, and we're asking it to make an assessment on us. We're asking it to look at us. We're asking it to, what does a doctor do? A doctor evaluates you. It assesses you, and it gives us alternatives. It gives us options to doctor us for medicines. It makes recommendations. It makes a diagnosis. And so what happens is we strip ourselves down to ask Mother Nature to diagnose us, to ask us what we are in need of. We have to ask. That voice needs to happen, whether that's silent voice or whether that's out loud through prayer. We have to bring ourselves into connection with Grandmother Earth and her, because we are grandchildren. Again, all of this has been around for so long, and then they brought us in as grandchildren. There's a kinship there. And so we have to ask We have to ask the wind. We have to ask the sun. We have to ask Grandmother Earth. We've asked for many years. We've been doing that. Where do you think all of these pills come from? These medicines come from? They come from plants. Why do you think the sun? Why do you think the doctor, when you visit the doctor, they say, well, you need to get some exercise. You need to be in movement. Your body is meant to move. And when you're moving with all of creation. And so what we need to do, it's important for us to go to our doctors and develop relationships with our doctors, our healthcare professionals. That's important. But we also need to go to Grandmother Earth and listen to her voice. Excuse me. We need to go to the winds and face each direction. In the morning, go to the east, face the directions, because that's the power of the morning sun, which wakes up everything. The plants wake up. The animals start to wake up. The temperatures change. The trees start to, even the sunflower starts to turn. So we need to do that at different times. At night, we look in the west direction and we ask the direction. That we ask the moon has such an important part of the weather system as well. And so when we start to ask creation to help us, to diagnose us, to influence us, to guide us, we are asking the voices of those teachings, the voices of those relationships to help us. And they will, but we've been conditioned to view that none of that has a voice, that there is only silence. Now the silence is going to be important, because the silence is what's going to allow us to actually hear. And we know that the moon does make noises, right? But we've been conditioned to believe that we can't hear that. We've been conditioned to say that the earth doesn't make noises, and how that doesn't make sense. And now we know that this is untrue. And so this is the interconnectedness that we must do for ourselves. We have to ask ourselves, is there another way? And when we start to do that, and we stop this linear teaching from A, B, C, or D, we start to look throughout, which interconnects like almost like a plug-in. Just think in terms of a plug-in. And in your mind, in your body, in your soul, in your body, there's a plug-in. Just plug it in wherever you're at, where you're comfortable. And that's going to plug into your soul, to your spirit. And that's going to provide for you a direct connection with everything else that is moving. Or you can just do it the way that I do it. You don't think in terms of how we've been conditioned to think. You just raise your arms out. Or you just say a prayer that involves everything. Or you just walk outside. Or even if you have to be inside. Brick walls. When I would speak to men in prison, I would say, would you limit your grandparents' influence to the limitations of a concrete wall? Do you think that they aren't that powerful, that their influence isn't already within you? Or can pierce through concrete? Or work their way through other people, whether it be in your peers, or whether it be in a bird that suddenly appears on your ledge or outside of your cell, in your dreams. Everything that you're looking for is already around you and is already within you. It's all the same thing. And when we step outside of that linear thinking, A, B, or C, or D, we start to tell creation, and creation sees us as having stepped out of line. And now we start to think. We start to think, and we start to retrain our minds to think in terms of making the possible, making the impossible possible. Oh man, I'm getting close. And this is going to reshape us. It's going to provide wellness. It's going to provide healing. It's going to provide inspiration. There are voices. So when you go out onto your Humbletrea, onto your vision quest, you're going to hear the water. You're going to hear the river from 5 miles away. You're going to hear the birds. Even their different voices, they're different, the ways that each individual speaks. You're going to hear how the voice of the grass reacts with the wind. You're going to hear a bug crawling from 10 yards away. And I'm sorry, I do have to cut this video very short, but because I'm getting close to my turn off. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to ask you to please feel free to comment. This is going to go on Facebook and it's going to go on YouTube. Please feel free to comment. Please feel free to email me. Please feel free to reach out to me. We're relatives. Relatives, we are relatives. And right now is the time. And when you expand, there's going to be a part of you that is going to go out. That is meant to go out. But what is out there is also going to come in. And now you start to make your choices in life. Now you start to speak. Now you start to make those decisions. Now you start to go about your day. Now you start to become teachable. And that sacred space that is within you starts to have a direct consultation with all the sacred spaces that are all around. It's all around us. All you have to do is reach out. It's all around us. And it's not meant to be worshipped. It's all equal. You are equal to everything that is around you. You are equal to everybody that is around you. Step out of that box. Break out of that box. Or just ask. Stretch your arms out. Say a prayer and feel yourself being released. Meditate, visualize that, and go out. Because when you go out, all of creation will come in, because now those walls are down. If you have any questions, I gotta let you go. Oh yeah, I gotta turn off. Here, let's see, what time is it? Yeah, I'm right on schedule actually, but so if you have any questions, my email is on here. Just please like and share so that I can get as many followers as I can. I've been doing this for about 8 years, but now I'm going to be very patient. So I'm thanking you for your patience with the whole YouTube thing. And I want to just again address you as a relative. Thank you. You're all my relatives. Mitakuye Oyasin. I'll see you again soon.